Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kat, the Marketing Manager at BDI, and today I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Lolly. But before we get started, I want to direct your attention to the chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen. Everyone, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and tell everyone what organization you're from. Throughout the webinar, please put any questions you have for Lolly or for one another in the chat. She's going to host a Q&A after this session. This is a great place to ask questions and connect with other nonprofit leaders. Okay, let's get started. Today, we are being joined by BDI's Executive Vice President, Client Services, Lolly Colombo. With over 30 years of program and agency experience, Lolly has brought her passion, expertise, and heart of service to some of the world's most beloved charities and faith-based organizations. This includes Salvation Army, Operation Blessing International, Food for the Hungry, International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, CBN, In Touch Ministries, and many others. At BDI, Lolly takes the lead in introducing cutting-edge strategies for integrated marketing channel fundraising, and she works to ensure exceptional service for our clients. When she's not working, you can find her talking to the plants in her garden, frolicking with her chickens and her grandkids. Help me welcoming Lolly.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you. That's very sweet. I do love the grands. I love the weekends. I do talk to my tomatoes. And I have to tell you something. Last weekend, my granddaughter taught me something new. She was hugging my cypress tree and shaking it. And she said, Mimi, the way to get cypress trees to grow faster and taller is to hug them and shake them. So I guess I am truly a tree hugging California girl. So anyways,
well, it's
learn
great
all
to
things
have
from
you.
kids, you know.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you. Hey there, I'm Lolly Colombo, and I have the pleasure of serving as EVP of Client Service at BDI, recently rebranded from Brewer Direct. And if you're joining us for the first time, we're a comprehensive marketing and fundraising agency, and we have the privilege of coming alongside some of the most amazing nonprofit organizations that serve communities across the U.S. by delivering hope, restoring dignity, relieving human suffering, meeting critical physical and spiritual needs, and transforming lives. And it is our privilege and pleasure to do that. And I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This is our first webinar of 2022. And in the coming months, we'll be excited to bring you some other thoughtful and educational sessions. So let's get going. Today, we're going to talk about the power of transformational leadership. There is a lot out there about transformational leadership. There's a lot to see, a lot to read. It is not something new. Still, the reason I'm focusing on this topic today is leadership is relevant to all of us. Leadership skills are a vital part of human interaction, and transformational leadership is especially critical in a nonprofit, faith-based context. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to kick it off with a Bible verse, right? This is a verse of scripture. And it's a great way to get started with this conversation. Do not be conformed to this world, says Romans, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Every interaction we have, be it with those who are above us, those who are answering to us, those who are running alongside us, our neighbors, if you will, every human interaction deserves relationships that transform our journey, right? That transforms us and takes us to a better place. This is the crux of transformational leadership, and it is also our calling, right? So let's get started and let's talk about a definition of leadership. How do you define leadership? Do you define it by its attributes? That's one way you can do it. Or do you define it by its outcomes? Is leadership positional? The boss, is leadership a position? Or is it recognized authority? Or is it earned personal power, right? So there are lots of ways of looking at what leadership is. Countless attributions of good leadership as well. Skill, motivation, responsibility, support, communication, etc. I think intuitively, and having journeyed through our lives, we have all found ourselves in both leadership and followership roles at some point in time. And I think we also know or have a good handle on what we believe good leadership is, or at least I think we can identify it when we see it. I want to talk a little bit about leadership styles, because good leadership is a function also of a style and of a structure. You know, the leadership is part of an organization. And as you can see, there are so many kinds of leadership styles. There is authoritarian, there is democratic, bureaucratic, delegative, directive, corrective, transactional, charismatic, servant leadership. So, in which style of leadership do you find your organization today? Or with which style of leadership do you personally align as a leader or as a follower? Which style of leadership really resonates for you? Kat is going to share a poll on the right-hand side of your screen. So you'll see there's a little tab that says poll. Click on that. She's going to share a poll with you. And feel free to respond if you'd like to share. We'd love to get the interaction going. So feel free to respond. Tell us which form of leadership you have in your organization, or tell us which style of leadership you most align with, you resonate with. Alrighty, and we're going to get going with this. We're going to have lots of fun with this process. Okay, let's look at leadership structures. And I know this is kind of a crazy slide, but these are some big companies that are out there in the world right now. And these are leadership hierarchies. And again, this is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, example of what these leadership structures look like. But there are leadership structures that are pyramid shaped, right? Where you have the boss at the top and body of folks at the bottom. Some are circular. There are flat leadership structures. Organic is legitimately an alternative type of leadership hierarchy, which is essentially another word for what many of these look like on your screen right now. And even though these sketches are meant to be funny, how does the saying go? Comedy mimics reality, or art mimics reality, something like that. I want to point out, especially Microsoft, I thought this was especially funny, how they are so protective of their leadership structure. And then speaking of organic, let's go back to organic for a minute, because sometimes leadership structure isn't so easy to identify in an organization. And maybe your organization looks something like this: a tangle of steel wool. Of course, I'm teasing you right now. This is meant to be funny, but organizations are not always organized, and clear lines of authority can easily be lost in the everyday tyranny of the urgent and everything that we get ourselves involved in. Teammates might even steel themselves, okay, pun intended, against one another over miscommunications, attitudes, unclear direction, ambition. So this example may not be too far from reality. It may even be a picture of our own hearts in our leadership followership environments. But let me tell you, if you're ever in need of a very cool science experiment, in fact, I shared this with someone just the other day. It's so funny. And I wanted to, in the context of this, and so I wanted to share it with you. If you touch a 9-volt battery to a tangle of steel wool, see what happens. And note to self, please don't try this at home without a bucket of water standing by. The 9-volt battery will light the steel wool on fire. It's a pretty cool and entirely unexpected science experiment. Do it, have fun with it. But in all seriousness, even if a tangle of steel wool represents your leadership structure, or the way you feel about it on certain days, or the way you feel about your team even on certain days, your job as a transformational leader within your organization is to light your team on fire. Okay, illustration complete. Let's back up and take a look at a definition of leadership. Leadership is, according to Forbes, this is coming from Forbes now, leadership is a process of social influence. So I want to stop right there, and I want to sidebar for just a second, because I want to share something that the dictionary says about influence. So what is influence? And why does influence even matter? Well, according to the dictionary, influence is the ability or the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of another person. Thereby, influence is a tool for transformation. Another one, Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie says this: influence goes only with the one who will set aside his status, be it high and mighty or low and lowly, and put himself in the place of another. So the only way to effectively use the tool of influence to bring about transformation is to literally climb into the chair of another person and employ both understanding and empathy as you lead. Okay, jumping into some heavy stuff here, but let's come off of this sidebar and let's go back to our definition. Leadership is a process of social influence. By the way, John Maxwell has a very simple definition. He says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Maybe this is an oversimplification of the term leadership, but nevertheless, influence is the operative word. Leadership is a process of social influence that maximizes, optimizes, elevates, enhances, enriches, you're getting the idea, right? Empowers what? The efforts of others, right? Toward the accomplishment of a goal. That's where we're going next. It's all about achieving a goal. So leadership is the process of social influence in which you optimize and empower others to complete a goal. This is coming from Forbes. So now that we have a definition of leadership, I want us to talk about for a minute the dynamic of leaders and followers. This is a critical component. It's going to get a little bit heavy here. I'm going to bring in some examples, but a leader has a role and a follower has a role, right? And I want to share with you that when I was reading about some of this, I encountered that the Association for the U.S. Army, which is a nonprofit advocacy group for the Army, U.S. Army, says the following about leaders and followers. And I thought, who better than the U.S. Army, right? A leader is anyone who inspires and influences people. So we've seen the word inspiration already. We've seen the word influence. By providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish a mission and bring about improvement to the organization. That is an awesome definition of leadership. Peter Drucker, you know who Peter Drucker is? He's a marketing guru and business guru. He says the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. That's pretty simple. Is it too simple? Kat's going to launch another poll on the right-hand side of your screen. Be sure to jump in. Do you agree? Is this too simple? Jump on that poll. You'll see the results immediately. Just kind of a little bit of fun while we're getting into some heady stuff here. So good leadership then must bring about good followership. Do you agree? So good leaders inspire superior performance in their followers. So essentially leaders are those that get things done, right? Because they're accomplishing the task. They're successful at leading others. But the key to that leadership is based entirely on their engagement with and their genuine commitment to their followers. So followers are critical to leadership. And let's take a look at that right now. There is a website called embracingfollowership.com. I bet you didn't know that. I didn't know it either. But something that they say is very fascinating. They say the primary thrust of a leader's leadership is the quality of the follower's engagement. Okay, I'm going to say that again. The primary thrust of a leader's leadership is the quality of the follower's engagement. Let's look at a follower. Who is a follower? What do they do? Number one, they accept leadership. They submit to the guidance of a leader, right? So that's number one attribute really of a follower. In order to partner in achieving goals, serve in making visions reality, and accomplishing tasks. So they're getting stuff done, but they're submitting to leadership. They're submitting to the guidance of someone who's over them. A successful follower naturally wants to serve. A successful follower serves. They're proactive. They're critical thinkers. They anticipate what might lie ahead. They know what information a leader might need to lead successfully, and they contribute their gifts to support leadership, right? So the better a follower anticipates and contributes that intel up front, even before anybody even asks for it, the more successful that leader is and the more successful that led relationship can be. So, what are we seeing here? That being a better follower actually requires leadership skills, and we're going to go to that in just a minute here. In 2018, there was an article in Fast Company that was entitled, "Do you want to be a good leader? Learn to follow." It was authored by executive coach Tarina Allen, and it says the following, and I'm actually going to read it word for word because it's really good. Here it is on your screen. Followership is a key component to leadership. Best followers make the best leaders because they view others as equals. They get into their chair, right? They teach others as humans with similar struggles and shortcomings, and they value everyone's contributions to achieve goals. The best followers understand how their leader makes decisions, and they're aware of critical challenges their leader faces and have a complete set of personal leadership skills that enable confident responses to what that leader or organization needs. So a critical part of being a good follower is practicing servant leadership. Okay, servant leadership. Let's dig into that for a minute. I'm assuming we've all heard the term servant leadership. It was actually coined in 1970 by a man named Robert Greenleaf. He said the following about servant leadership. Servant leadership is understanding the needs of others. Sounds a lot like followership, if you were listening just a minute ago. Up and down the chain in an organization, and being available at the right level and being mentally prepared to serve all others. Servant leaders exist at all levels, he says, but one must be able to follow first. So why is this quote so excellent? Why is this so fascinating? There is such a relationship between followers and leaders that that's where the transformation happens. The line blurs right there. So here's where transformational leadership comes in. Nonprofit organizations are perfectly suited to this type of leadership style. Nonprofits are not building widgets, right? They're not manufacturing cars. Charitable organizations are serving heartfelt needs, and faith-based organizations particularly are serving issues of the heart. They don't thrive in an autocratic leadership environment or a coercive leadership environment or a directive leadership environment, because those kinds of environments are not aligned and are not necessarily in sync with the heart and mission of the organization and the spirit of the service that is going out from the nonprofit. Intellectual leadership may not be the right style for a faith-based nonprofit either, as lofty intellectual MOs might not inspire and empower followers, many of whom may be volunteers to your organization. Nonprofits are culture building. They are community building, vision casting, servant-driven organizations, and they bring healing and nurturing and education and restoration and connection to those they serve. Transformational leadership is a perfect model for the nonprofit leadership space. As a leadership style, it is often touted as the most effective leadership style because it's an approach that not only directs and motivates and guides and manages people, it inspires them, it stimulates them, it encourages them, it lights them on fire, maximizes them, optimizes them. We've heard all these words, empowers them, elevates them, equips them, enhances them, enriches them, develops their skills, their talents, their temperament, and the capacity, right? It's building the capacity in those you are leading to become leaders themselves. And that's where that blurry connection of transformation happens. Transformational leaders move the hearts and the minds of followers, and they also invite critical thinking. They inspire innovation and ownership of the goals and the values of the organization. And there's an article in Psychology Today that's called, "Are You a Transformational Leader?" And it claims that research evidence clearly shows that groups led by transformational leaders have higher levels of performance and higher levels of team satisfaction than groups led by other types of leaders. Transformational leaders are not only focused on the goal and the success metrics or on the outstanding outcomes you are chasing, but they are also focused on the people who are getting you there. That's the crux of the thing. It's not just chasing the goal, it's the development and the transformation of the people who are helping you get there, right? So what does a transformational leader look like? We're going to build an avatar. You know what an avatar is, right? It's like a profile. It's a person. We're going to build a persona around a transformational leader. And I could certainly position Jesus as the perfect transformational leader, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. His ministry, from the moment he said, follow me, right, to his group of disciples to this very day, is an outstanding model. He is, without a doubt, without hesitation, the epitome of transformational leader. But I'm going to present you with a little bit of a different illustration today. I hope we have some fun with it. Consider the Sherpa. I'm sure you've all heard of the Sherpa, or am I wrong? Hopefully you've all heard of the Sherpa. I was talking about this, like I said, I had a conversation about this a couple of days ago with somebody, and they had said that they had always thought once upon a time that a Sherpa was actually a type of a llama. Well, that would be wrong. A Sherpa is a member of a Himalayan people living on the border of Nepal and Tibet, and they are renowned for their skill and their service in mountaineering. Sherpas lead climbers to the top of Mount Everest, for example. In fact, most of the climbers who go on these treks to Mount Everest would never be able to successfully climb Mount Everest. And I'm saying most, it's maybe everybody. In fact, I don't think they'd let you on the mountain without Sherpas. They could never be successful without Sherpas setting the climbing ropes and placing the ladders over those dangerous, ice cracks and carrying the majority of the climbers' gear up the mountains. So how are transformational leaders anything like Sherpas? We're going to look at this. Sherpas are servant leaders. Transformational leadership is about servant leadership. And that's why Jesus is such an amazing example and the epitome of transformational leadership. But I'm going to ask you to keep your minds in both the literal world and the figurative world simultaneously as we go through these bullet points. I'm talking about Sherpas, but I'm also figuratively talking about the traits and attributes of transformational leaders. So as I go through these bullet points and I speak to these attributes of both Sherpas and transformational leaders, keep your minds in both the literal and figurative worlds. Okay, here we go. Here's the list. Both Sherpas and transformational leaders have a keen understanding of the task at hand. They know the culture, they know the area, they know the environment, they keep an eye on the temperature and the conditions, they know what to expect, and they know to expect the unexpected. They have a passion and a reverence. This is super important. They have a passion and a reverence for the actual and or the proverbial mountain at hand. 2, they set clear goals and clearly communicate them to their followers. Clear communication is critical, and it goes both ways. Listening, and speaking skills are essential on the climb. Both Sherpas and transformational leaders hold lofty expectations for the team, and they are the first to set an example of commitment to those expectations. In fact, Sherpas and transformational leaders, thrive in high altitudes. They're forward thinkers. They lead. They're thinking 2 and 20 steps ahead. They map out the way, and they concisely communicate the plan to their followers. They are expert navigators, or they have those who are expert navigators at their elbow, right alongside. The theory of transformational leadership was developed in 1978 by leadership expert James McGregor Burns, who said that leaders and followers make each other to advance to a higher level of moral and motivation. So leaders and followers, again, there's that threading, there's that blurry between leaders and followers that happens here. They make each other to advance to a higher level of moral and motivation. A Sherpa would say, in their own words, they always endeavor to make sure that every climber succeeds to the summit. Sherpas and transformational leaders know the way ahead. So they plan, they understand the turns, they know when to pivot, they understand the challenges, the slippery slopes, and the obstacles. And I don't mean to be cavalier here, but they literally and figuratively know where the dead bodies are. And they're charged with avoiding precarious and perilous paths, protecting their team, and getting them to the top. They are resilient. Sherpas are. So are transformational leaders. They're expectant of change and experienced at problem solving. They're there to help their followers negotiate the ice falls, the avalanches, the extreme weather, the lack of oxygen, injury, extreme altitude, and they're experienced, proactive, and creative at problem solving. They evaluate, they consider, they take into consideration, they're keen to the talent and the fitness and the experience of their followers, and they make the adjustments as needed. But remember, they're trying to get everyone to the summit, not just those that are more experienced, not just those that are more talented, not those that have greater fitness. The entire group is going to make it to the summit, and they're going to make the adjustments that are needed. They ensure that their team is equipped. They manage the gear, they carry the provisions. So let's think figuratively here. Oxygen bottles, medical supplies. Apply this to your leadership. Water, food, as they pursue safe passage up the mountain. By example, both Sherpas and transformational leaders inspire their followers to reach for the implausible as they take their people to the top of the mountain, right? So they encourage and they mobilize. Here's another one. They inspire trust. If the climbers of Everest didn't trust their Sherpas, there would be no climb. These folks, these Sherpas and these transformational leaders have integrity, because without integrity, who's going to follow you? And if no one is following you, you're not leading, right? If you've never been exposed to the trusted advisor's trust equation, here's another sidebar. And this one is, I love this. This is something I love, and I just hold this dear to my heart because I think it is so critical. Trust is the basis of a successful transformational leadership / followership bond. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, right? And here we're putting together a relationship that's chasing after a goal. And you're coming from different worlds, different families, different environments, and yet you're coming together to chase after one thing. Trust is critical. Trust is critical climbing that mountain, right? With those Sherpas. Trust. Here's the equation, and this is put out by Trusted Advisor Associates. These guys are smart and they know how to build trust. Trust is a function of your credibility, know your stuff, excel at your craft, plus reliability, keep your word, deliver on your promises, plus intimacy, your approachability, your charisma, your personal rapport, your transparency, your integrity, your goodness, your kindness, your self-control, divided by your level of self-orientation. It's a quotient. In other words, the more you put yourself above others and lower the more you put yourself above others, the lower your overall trust quotient will be, even if you rock at the stuff on the top line. Basic mathematics. Okay, let's go back to the mountaintop. Sherpas and transformational leaders model teamwork. They lead by example. They're not only committed to helping the group and the organization achieve its goals, right? But they're also helping group members. They're all about getting that last guy up the mountain. Even if those at the very back of the line that are summiting Mount Everest, the newer, the less experienced, maybe even the less talented members, they're getting them all to fulfill their individual potential. And that is the responsibility of a transformational leader. Both Sherpas and transformational leaders walk the walk, and they're attentive to and have a genuine concern for their followers' needs. So lastly, they carry the load, right? They carry the load and they hit the trail themselves, and they are the ultimate servant leaders. That is something for all of us to aspire to. So now you have a profile of a transformational leader, one that you will not soon forget, and it is not a llama, it is a Himalayan Sherpa. But I hope you hang on to that picture, because like I said, these are qualities that all of us need to aspire to if we want to have highly productive and very satisfied teams. So quickly, I want to look at the 4 I's of transformational leadership theory. So we're getting a little bit heady again, but this is coming from the smart folks at Binghamton University. There are 4 points here that summarize the character traits of a transformational leader. I know we saw it in the avatar that we just created, but I want to show you what the best practice of a transformational leader is, because leadership can be learned. This kind of leadership can be learned. So I'm going to digress for just a second. Go to another Bible verse, Philippians, one of my favorite books in the Bible. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. We're admonished to live as servant leaders in all of our relationships. And if we're admonished, it's because we can discipline ourselves. We can learn this. We can grow, and we can move to higher attitudes and to higher altitudes. Clearly from this scripture reference, the differentiator lies in setting yourself aside. It goes back to that trust equation, your self-orientation, lowering your self-orientation and instead growing your credibility, reliability, and intimacy with regard to those that you're following or leading because of that relationship. You know what I'm saying? Here we go. Here are the I's. 1, intellectual stimulation. Transformational leaders establish a culture of creativity and encourage innovative thinking. BDI has our board chair. His name is John Reynolds. He's a brilliant guy. And in a recent blog on leadership, he said in his blog, these leaders create a strategic, collective, what did he say? These leaders create a strategic thinking culture where all employees share a common and collective future that's clear and understood. So leaders have a strategic thinking culture where everyone understands where they're going, right? But they also understand the why and the where of the organization is going. I don't know if you remember Ross Perot. He was known for saying 2 words in the context of almost anything that he said, right? And these 2 words were go, do. Essentially 2 utterly empowering words, go and do. So this is intellectual stimulation. You're empowering your people to go. Okay, number 2, quickly. Transformational leaders foster personal and individual relationships. So they practice empathy. We talked about that. They're good communicators. They listen and they're responsive. They do not micromanage. Rather, they trust, empower, and delegate their team. Now we're hearing these words that come out of some of those leadership styles like delegative and what am I trying to say? Anyways, we're pulling some of the characteristics out of other leadership styles, right, to find this one transformational leadership, but it's those qualities that change lives, right? The other thing about individual consideration is that they are generous and quick to acknowledge triumphs. Okay, I'm getting off track, sorry. Inspirational motivation is number 3. Transformational leaders clearly articulate the vision. So they impart passion, their own passion. They inspire their teams to a strong sense of purpose, right? And to a mission mindset. And they establish an environment where innovative thinking is encouraged and applauded and rewarded. So in other words, transformational leaders, they make their passion contagious and they inspire creativity. Next, in idealized influence. Sometimes these guys at Binghamton University get a little bit heady, but each one of these 4 I's of transformational leadership is super important. Idealized influence is transformational leaders serve as role models for their teammates. You lead by example. You naturally then influence people who are around you just by the way you carry yourself, just by the way you respond to situations. You must set the standard for excellence, for temperament, for integrity. Successfully building trust within your team results in an environment of respect and admiration, but ultimately emulation. of the passion and the purpose and the ideals that you hold as a leader. So you're multiplying yourself, I guess, your passion, the direction, your leadership skills. That's who you want to strive to be. I'm not saying we're there, right? But I'm saying this is where we need to be. So what does the world need right now? What does the world need? How do we sum this whole thing up? Nonprofit organizations particularly benefit from transformational leadership connections. That is not to say that for-profit corporations do not, but I know we're talking about nonprofit corporations, and you all are coming from nonprofit backgrounds, nonprofit organizations, charitable, probably most, if not all of you, faith-based organizations. Faith-based organizations are called to this style of leadership. These interpersonal, professional connections drive success. They drive performance, they drive growth, they drive loyalty, they drive love, they drive the development of like-minded followers to a place where they become like-minded leaders. They take like-minded followers and they position them to become leaders. That's that transformational process. Here's what the world needs now. I'm going to summarize here. Oops, here we go. Click. The world needs more Sherpas. In other words, leaders with dirty knees. And I'm saying dirty knees because you're in the trenches, you're on the mountaintops, you're in the mud, you're in the valleys, and you're on your knees in prayer. The world needs more Sherpas, and I'm not sure Sherpas are on their knees in prayer, but you get the idea. The world needs leaders who trust and empower. The world needs leaders who are fearless and tireless and understanding of the times. The world needs leaders who are authentic, leaders who give of themselves, leaders who invest in people, leaders who don't give up, leaders who are compassionate, generous, empathetic, resilient, leaders who foster, nurture, and celebrate a culture of ideation and innovation, and leaders who are equal parts passionate visionary and patient mentor, and tireless cheerleader. I know I covered a lot today, and we're stopping kind of abruptly here, but there's so much to be learned about becoming a transformational leader and transforming your team. And again, the fruit of that leadership is going to be a transformed team. It's going to be a team that comes along with you and grows in every way that you give them an opportunity to grow in. I know it's been a lot. I know I've packed a lot into this time. I'm actually over. It was supposed to be a 30-minute webinar, but here we are at 45 minutes or something. I hope you're able to glean some useful information. And I want to invite any questions right now. I want to invite you to get on the chat and put any questions or comments or anything in there, really. I really want to hear what's working for you. I want to hear what your challenges are. I want to know what you're facing with your teams, what you've learned and what you've discovered along the way, both following as followers and as leaders, because I think we find ourselves in both of those roles often. So let's open it up for questions and comments. And I'll be on the chat for the next 10 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. I don't know how much time, Kat, I know you're on the call. Do we have time?
Yes, let's do about 5 minutes. I have a couple questions that I've received on the side, but go ahead if you guys have any questions for Lolly as we get started and put them in the chat. So the first question that I have for you is, we've talked about leadership styles and leadership structures. What is the difference between leadership styles and leadership structures?
Okay, so leadership styles are the way you go about your leadership relationships, your leader-follower relationships. Leadership structures are the way that it's kind of like your organizational chart of, it's more the tactical side of it. Because ideally you will have, the boss and then the next level of people or whatever your structure is. We talked about all those crazy structures, even organic, right? Craziness, right? But at least there is a relationship. There's a line that goes from whoever the leader is to the followers in whatever capacity they're in. That is the structure. This person reports to that person. This person reports to that person. This person reports up. This person has this dotted line. It's essentially what the organizational structure is. And the style is how do you manage those relationships? Are you empowering? Are you, all the things we talked about transformational leadership? What is that relationship that you have with folks? And those are some of the styles we talked about, like, directive or autocratic or et cetera, right? So that's the difference between styles and structures.
Great, thank you. We have a question here from Trisha. She said, in my opinion, listening more than talking is a strong leadership trait. If this is a weak area for a leader, what do you suggest they do to better work on this?
Trisha, that's such a great question because it's so true. And I know I check myself all the time because, I mean, if you're, a forthcoming personality, you have ideas, you want to share those ideas, and sometimes you can step on others and others don't get the chance to give their ideas. It really is essentially ripping out the duct tape and putting it on your face, proverbially, right? You just have to give it a beat. It's a discipline. It really is a discipline to learn how to listen and to give the folks that work on your team the opportunity to share and to talk and to contribute and not be the smartest person in the room, not be the boss in the room, but really to elevate everyone in the room to share their thoughts, share their opinions. And obviously you don't want to lose control of a meeting, but you want to hear from people. And I think the way that you do that is disciplining yourself as a leader to just give it a beat. Don't answer every question, just wait. Count to 10 if you have to. Practices like that, I think, are the best way. But I agree with you. Listening is a critical leadership skill. Thank you for your question. It's a good one.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question I received on the side. Would you say that transformational leadership is another way of saying servant leadership?
Yeah, we made that comparison, servant leadership and transformational leadership. They're just so close. And it's that whole threading together of the leader and the follower and the relationship that happens in between, because this leadership is growing this follower to become a leader. And that's what our task is. And by doing that, the leader needs to serve like Jesus served, right? So Jesus is an epitome of a transformational leader. He's also a servant leader. And from the scripture that I shared, that's what we're called to do as well. So yes, the short answer to that question is yes. Servant leadership, transformational leadership are the same thing pretty much.
Great. Okay, we have time probably for one last question. What is the advice to nonprofit organizations whose transformational leadership is clear externally but suffers internally?
Wow. So it's great that externally folks see the leadership being a certain way. That's nice. That's helpful for how people see you, right? But if internally you don't have that same leadership, that's what we need to strive for. That's what we need to share internally and all levels of leadership and followership. Followers, we talked about followers and their role. We need to make sure that followers are in their role and maximizing their deliverable, right? As a follower, being there for leadership. But we also have to ensure that leadership is optimizing the environment for our followers so that they can grow and become leaders, right? There are like if we were to go back and look at the top 5 styles of leadership out there, like there's a poll that was done by wework.org or .com to find out what is the most common leadership style, right? The top one out there in the United States is authoritarian. It is autocratic. It is, I am the boss and you will do what I tell you to do, right? The second one, interestingly enough, is democratic, where you have more of a flat environment and everybody's kind of bossing and everybody's kind of this. The third one is delegative, which is also like, let it go, let everybody do their own thing. That's not ideal. Although there are pieces of every single one of these styles of leadership that you want to have in your transformational leadership environment. Number 4, I think, is transactional leadership. You do this for me, I'll do that for you, tit for tat kind of a thing. And then the 5th most common is transformational leadership. I think transformational leadership, I mean, sure, we're talking people who are building widgets and who are manufacturing cars, and there are times where you need to say, this needs to be done right this second, give it to me now, if you give it to me now, I'll give you the day off. I mean, there are times that kind of stuff needs to be transacted. But for the most part, transformational leadership is the one that's building and discipling up people to be the next leaders. And I think within an organization, I think it needs to be brought to the attention of leadership. If you feel like you don't have that kind of an environment, if you don't feel like you have a transformational environment, if you don't feel like you have an environment where you can grow and go somewhere and become something. And I'm not saying knock on the door of your boss and say, I want to raise right now. This is who I deserve to be. No, it's serving at that optimal level and then finding that path to growth and leadership in an organization. So it would be, I'm giving you a long answer here, but the short answer is if you're not seeing that really happening in your organization, then that needs to be brought to the attention of leaders. It needs to be discussed at a leadership level. There needs to be conversations between immediate followers and their leaders, and work toward it, because it's an amazing environment if we can all get there. And I mean, it's a goal. I mean, it's Christian living, right? It's hard. We fall on our faces sometimes, but I think it's something to aspire to for sure.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we have a couple more questions we didn't get to today, but we're out of time. So if you have a question that we didn't get to, Lolly will email you separately to answer your question. Yeah. And so keep an eye out for those emails. And a recording of this webinar will also be sent to everyone. So thank you for joining us today. And thanks, Lolly, for sharing your wealth of knowledge.
You're welcome. It was fun. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye.